Hey, this is Natalie Hoffman with flyingfreenow.com, and I am going to answer first of all, good morning, happy Monday. I'm going to answer a question that is a question that I get quite often, and it's something that I definitely was asking myself at one time. So here's the question. My husband pulls me into crazy conversations where I feel interrogated and like I have to answer his questions or I'm a bad person. When I try to ask him questions or tell him something I wish could be different, he turns it back on me and accuses me. He often accuses me of the very things he is doing. And sometimes if I tell him, for example, that he isn't listening or taking responsibility, he will say, "Well, you aren't listening and taking responsibility." How do I deal with these crazy conversations? I really do feel like I'm going crazy. So the first thing I want to talk about in answering this question is your reality versus their reality. And one of the things that I've learned from Patricia Evans, who wrote The Verbally Abusive Relationship, there's a book that I found. I don't think it's in print anymore. It's called Teen Torment. And how she puts it in that book is fascinating and makes sense to me. She says that people who are bullies or who like to manipulate and use and control other people are living in a pretend world. And in their pretend world, they're defining who you are. So how I put it when I'm teaching the women in my private group is I say, you are like a little Lego character in their universe, in their brain space. That's who you are. You're not a real live flesh and blood person with your own ideas, your own opinions, your own perspective, your own experiences. Instead, I'm sorry, I got a notification that I'm on live and it's really distracting me. I'm going to get rid of that. Anyway, so you're the Lego character, but that's not who you really are. So what they're doing when they say things to you and define you, like they might say, you are just, and a lot of, Christian bullies will use the Bible. In their pretend world, what the Bible means to them is something that they can use to manipulate and control other people. And that's their interpretation of the Bible. That's how they use the Bible, but that's their pretend world. And what we have to do, our first job is to separate reality from their pretend world. Sometimes we think because we're married to them that we have this shared space. And if they're living in this crazy pretend world, then we have to join them there. And we don't. In fact, it's not healthy for us to join them there if they've got some toxic pathology stuff going on where they need to get some psychological help. It's not going to be helpful for us to join them and buy into their pretend reality. So when they define you and they maybe say, you're rude because you want to bring up an issue that's going on in your relationship, and to them, what they're making that mean in their pretend world is that you are a rude person for wanting to solve a problem. Whereas in your world, you're just trying to solve a problem. And then when they say you're rude, if you're buying into their pretend world, then you'll be stunned. You'll step back and you'll be like, I'm rude? Oh my goodness, I don't feel like I said that rude. I don't feel like I didn't have that. Like, you'll start getting really confused because you're not a rude person. You're not coming to the table and trying to be rude. You're just trying to solve a problem because you actually genuinely care about the relationship. You want to actually solve the problem. What he's doing is he's cutting you off and saying you're rude. All right, that's a crazy conversation. So the problem really, the problem is that they have this pretend world, but there's nothing that you can do. Oh shoot, it's saying I have a bad connection. I hope this is still working. But the problem is that you're actually believing him and you're buying into his pretend world. And that's where you want to cut it off. You want to do that personal work on yourself. This is what we do in Flying Free and in Flying Higher. Those two groups, we work on actually distinguishing ourselves from toxic individuals and then figuring out where we are, where our boundaries are, where they end, where their little world ends and where ours begins. All right, so always remember too, I want to make sure I reiterate the point about the Bible, because he uses the Bible in his universe to get his way. So many women will say, well, he quotes these Bible verses, and then I just feel so guilty. How many of you, when you read the Bible, all you're reading about is all the things that you're doing wrong? That's from your programming. That's from either the way you were raised, or maybe it's the way the church has programmed you. That's completely, it's not healthy for your spiritual growth or your spiritual walk with our Creator God, for you to read the Bible and think that all it is like a hammer banging you over the head. And that's you also buying into, again, the reality of your abuser, or the reality of other individuals who like to control other people and kind of manage everybody. And the reason why everyone wants to manage everybody is because we all want to be happy, right? And so a lot of people think, well, if I can manage and control all the people, then I'll be happy and then I'll feel good about myself. We can fall into that category. We can do that too. We are probably not abusive about it, but we think about it. We want to manage, and we want to manage our husbands or our exes or our children in such a way so that they will do the things that we want them to do so that we can be happy, instead of just learning how to manage our own space and letting them be who they are, and then making decisions about how intimate we want to be with with a person who maybe is chronically abusing us. All right, so your job number 1 is to discover the fact that your two worlds are completely separate, and just because you're married doesn't mean you live in the same reality. So then, if you're able to do that, and it takes time, it can take even months, years to actually extricate yourself from their reality. But once you do that, then you're going to be able to do the second thing, which is to stop responding to all of their pretend world, which is a lot of drama in their pretend world. So when he asks you questions, once you've established that he's in his pretend world, you need to recognize that those questions are bait. He's trying to draw you in. He needs your energy. He needs the fight to make himself feel like he's alive and worthwhile. These people are, generally speaking, are very dead inside. And so they'll create some drama to create that energy and that life. And he feeds off of negativity. And by the way, I realize that on this public page, there are maybe men who are watching this who are living with a woman like this. And I know women like this. So it's definitely can go both ways, okay? But this page is for women specifically who are going through abusive relationships. But if you're a man and you're watching, you can certainly apply this the other way. I read this, let's see, this is from Richard Friedman. He's a psychiatrist, and he writes in the Times op-ed, he says, in one social science experiment, people were told to spend 15 minutes alone in a room with thoughts. The only possible distraction was an electric shock that they could administer to themselves. And 67% of men and 25% of women shocked themselves, choosing negative stimulation over no stimulation. That is pretty powerful. And it shows that we say we don't like, a lot of people say, well, I don't want the fight. And yet what they're doing is actually creating an environment where there is a lot of fighting. So what do you do? How do you respond to people, to your spouse or someone else who's trying to bait you? You have to recognize that it's bait. It's a juicy worm on a hook, and you don't want to take the bait. So not arguing with someone like this, when you recognize that they're in their pretend world, if you argue with them, what you're doing is you're letting them know that they have a reasonable thing. They're saying something reasonable that deserves a reasonable comeback or a reasonable argument. And that's just simply not true. You don't want to give them that energy. You can just simply say, I'm not comfortable answering that question right now. Or you can say, I'm not interested in this conversation right now. Or don't turn around and define them. I'm guilty of this, okay? Sometimes we'll want to turn around and throw it back on them because then we think that that's going to help the situation, or we can get it off of ourselves, but that's their tactics. So let them keep their tactics, Your tactic is simply to disengage. You don't have to be drawn into crazy conversations. I know I used to, when our conversations used to go in circles with my ex, I would start singing this little song, round and around and around we go, where we stop, nobody knows. And that was my sort of insane, crazy way of responding, but it wasn't healthy. That was a demonstration of how I was so caught up in his world and I was spinning around in circles that part of it was sarcasm. It was my way of kind of jolting myself and going, Natalie, this is crazy, get out. But then I actually brought that energy into the room, which I shouldn't have done. What was better was towards the end, I did this more and more. Didn't get great at it, but what was better is to just disengage. So this is what it means. You need to stop expecting that your husband or whoever you're doing this with, you need to stop expecting that they are going to be able to have a reasonable conversation with you. Stop expecting that. They're not. As soon as you start arguing, that's because you're thinking and expecting that they should have a reasonable conversation with you. They can't do that. They're always going to deflect it on you. They're always going to blame you. They're always going to accuse you and put all the responsibility back on you. Don't expect them to do the things that you want them to do, even if it's the minimum basic things. Like, let's say, for example, that you want your husband to interact with your son more. Don't expect him to do that, and don't think that you're the one who's going to make that happen. That's your husband's a big boy. If he wants to interact with his son, he can do that all by his own self. He doesn't need your help. And if he doesn't do it, guess what that means? That means he doesn't want to do it, because all the humans do what they want to do. All the humans do what makes us feel good. If he's not spending time with your son, it's because spending time with your son doesn't make him feel good. And is that a great reality? No, it's not. It pretty much sucks. But you know what? That's his choice. Now, I wouldn't go and tell your son, yeah, your dad doesn't spend time with you because he doesn't want to. I wouldn't go and do that, because that's triangulation and that's going to create all kinds of pain for your son. Is your son picking up what his dad's putting down? Yeah, he is, because kids are smart that way. Their brains are recording everything that happens, and it's creating a program in their mind for how they see life and how they're going to live their lives. And it's really sad, because that's what happens. But here's the thing. Here's what you can do. You can't do anything about your husband, but what you can do is you can connect with your son. Okay? You can spend time with your son. You can take your son out. You can sit down and let your son vent and listen to him and validate him and see him and do all the things for him that you wish that your husband would do for you. But stop expecting your husband to provide those things for you or for your son if he's not providing them, because he doesn't want to. And if you try to say, well, you really need to do this because you're the man of the house and the Bible says blah, 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 then you're kind of just doing what he's doing to you. I'm not saying that's abusive. You can totally bring that up. You can always make a request. We can always make requests of people. And that's good. But if you've already made that request 500,000 times and it's not been met with any kind of like light bulb moments for him, then the chances of that happening in the future are pretty much negligible. So what's the point of bringing all of your energy into all of that anymore? So stop expecting him to do stuff. Stop expecting him to do other things too, not just in his interactions. Stop expecting him to stop doing things. Okay, so if he thinks that it's perfectly acceptable to go up to a child, an older child, and slap him on the butt and say, "How you doing today?" and the older child turns around and says, "Please don't slap me on the butt, Dad," and then he goes into his pretend world, dads can totally slap their older kids on the butt. Doesn't care. It doesn't matter who it is. That's okay. And then he can in his pretend world, dads can slap him hard on the butt. But that's his reality. So he's not going to actually honor or respect the boundaries of other people because they're not real to him. In his reality, in his universe, between his two ears, all of you guys are Lego characters, and he can do whatever the hell he wants to with his Lego characters. But in your reality, and this is where you need to teach your kids, you can say, and you should say, "Dad, please don't slap me on the butt. That's disrespectful." You can point it out. That's disrespectful. And then you can set a boundary. If you're going to slap me on the butt, I'm going to tell my school counselor that my dad won't stop slapping me on the butt. And then follow through with that. Or if you have a regular therapist, now if you don't have someone that you can tell, then you need to do something else. Dad, if you're going to slap me on the butt, I'm not going to stay in this room with you. I'm not going to participate in what we're participating. Show respect. And of course, Dad, if he's in his reality where dads can do that, of course he's going to go into a big, huge tirade about how you're making a big mountain out. I mean, you know all the cliches that they use. They'll throw out the same things. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, making such a big deal out of nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. You're just fine. That didn't hurt. What's the big deal? And he'll minimize everything. And then he might accuse, well, you do that to your brother or sister. You did that to your mom. You do blah, 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 blah. Well, you need to do your homework. And he'll do all of that. We all know the story. Okay, that's how it goes. And then you can be a model. If you can be a model for your kids of how to get out of those crazy conversations, what should you do to respond to all of that crap? All of those things are pretend words. They're just pretend words floating out into space that he just spewed out. Think of them like cotton candy colors, like there's some blue words and some pink words and some rainbow words, and they're all fluffy and just words floating. Now you get to decide what you want those words to mean. Do you want them to mean that you are actually someone who's making a big deal out of nothing, someone who's a nagging, dripping faucet, someone who's a Jezebel, someone who's a rebellious teenager because you asked your dad to stop slapping you? Do you want to make all of those crazy, crazy words? Because that's what they are. They're crazy, crazy words. His reality is the crazy one, not yours. Do you want to make those mean that you are crazy and that you're a bad person? You actually don't have to make those words mean anything. What you can make it mean is that, wow, crazy dad or crazy husband. And then you can just walk away and just understand that that's his reality and it's not yours. Now, is this easy to do? Of course it's not easy to do. And are you going to be successful at it on a regular basis? No, you're not. It's going to be like a try it out. You're going to fail. For me, I remember that when I first started this work with my ex-husband, I would catch myself getting in the crazy after the crazy was over. And then I would look back and I'd go, oh my gosh, I got caught up in the crazy. Then I would start catching myself sooner, like towards the end of the crazy conversation, and then I would excuse myself. Then I started catching it sooner than that, until pretty soon I was able to, I didn't always do it, but I was able to more times than not even get into the crazy at all. In fact, what I stopped doing is I stopped giving him feedback altogether, gave him absolutely no feedback whatsoever about anything. If he did something to one of the kids, I didn't say anything about it. That doesn't mean I approved of it. I wrote it down, dated it, and kept it and started keeping a record of everything that he did. And that was I can hear drama happening in my other room, so I need to go. But yeah, I'm just going to go now because there's some crazy going on in the next room with my child. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you, I want to let you know that the Flying Free Sisterhood, where we actually do this kind of work and I help you process and do all of this work, it's opening up again. It's going to not be open again until April of 2021, but you will have a small window of opportunity to jump on before it closes for that length of time on October 1st. And you can read more about this group and find out how to be part of it and get on the waiting list by going to joinflyingfree.com. That's it. Just joinflyingfree.com. It'll give you all the deets, and you can stick your name and email there. And then when it opens up, I'll send you an email and let you know that it's open. And I have some other little perks and interesting things that I'm going to send to you too if you're on that waiting list. So that's it. Fly free.